and welcome to our podcast on the Africa Indaba Automation Conference. My name is Kim Roberts, and I'm the editor of SA Instrumentation and Control magazine. There's some top-level speakers lined up, and we're very excited to introduce a few of them today. They'll give you a few quick insights into their keynotes and a taste of what's to come. So be ready for them to challenge everyday thinking and bring a fresh view of what's really happening in the automatic world. Basically, the theme moves from ethics to inequality, to strategy, to opportunity. So first, we have Professor Thuli Madonsela, who will set the ethical bar. J.P. Murray Klein will expose the real-world consequences of automation. Mitch Olbrey will challenge whether strategy actually changes anything. And Jesse Indaba will take us into space and show how automation can improve life here on Earth. So let's get started. Our first speaker needs no introduction. I'm very privileged to introduce Professor Thuli Madonsela, who's one of Africa's most respected voices on ethics, leadership, and social justice. She'll ask not what technology can do, but what it should do, and give us some guiding principles for Africa's move to automation. Over to you, Thuli.
Thank you, Kim. When we think about technology and automation, we always concerned about what it's going to take away from us. However, we don't realize that if we inform the transition and make it just, there's a lot more to be gained than to be lost. I will be speaking at the conference about equity beyond platitudes, a just technological transition to ensure human rights and sustainable development goals. Technological transition is here. It doesn't ask for our permission, yet it does bring unprecedented challenges. And it's us to underpin it with ethical guardrails that ensure that we're not victims of the fourth industrial revolution, but beneficiaries of it. Not just beneficiaries as ourselves, but we also make sure that the next generation is benefited. We're talking about artificial intelligence, automation, digital platforms, and data-supported governance. From the Center for Social Justice, we've seen the challenges that technical transition brings to society if it's not fused with ethics. And from our side, it's the ethic of care at the core of which is this, hence the emphasis on just transition. For example, during COVID-19, governments bent on saving humanity from being infected by the HIV virus moved into e-governance and digital commerce. And this was good in that not many of us had to cluster in the malls and other spaces where we could infect each other. So physical distancing was possible, but at what cost? The lockdown impact on township businesses was devastating. The impact on education was devastating. So what was the ethic there? It was important that we do a predictive impact analysis to look at what would be fair to all. We took a model from China, which was based on the fact that that society is basically a society of mostly digital natives. And yet here we were not yet digital natives. So the idea is not in it, it's always to look at how do we make sure no one is left behind, but how do we also we use this opportunity to do better. And at the end of the day, that transition has made it possible for many people to get education opportunities they couldn't get. Through and other platforms, people now can get courses from Harvard, from Yale, and previous universities where they could never dream of participating in. So the problem does not lie with the transition. The problem lies with us predicting how that transition might impact differently on different people and making sure that we meet everyone where they are through predictive impact analysis. Just lastly, to do that, we always have to be reminded of human rights, global instruments on human rights, the promise of social justice in island conventions, and the Philadelphia Declaration. And our Constitutional Court, too, has told us that whatever we do, we have to always think about the fact that equality is not just formalities. It's not just about inviting everyone to come in when some cannot partake of the opportunities and privileges. So equality that is underpinned by justice, including social justice, ensures that there's fairness to all. And how can you be fair to all? By understanding the diversity of human beings and meeting everyone where they are, but not just meeting them where they are, impacting them transformatively, as the Constitutional Court has said in Minister of Finance versus Van Heerden. Impact people in such a way that you advance equality, you advance fairness, and therefore you improve peaceful coexistence. And technology, using instruments such as the Social Justice Impact Assessment and Plan A, can be a friend rather than an enemy of equity and peaceful coexistence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Tuli. Okay, next we have JP Murray-Klein, who's a leading future.
Hi, Kim. I'm not going to mention anything that I'm covering in my keynote talk. I'm very lucky to be opening the floor. The question that was put forward to me is ethics. Is it setting the standard and mapping out strategy and the gap between what we say and what actually happens? And there's a lot of talk. So my immediate feelings on those points were that ethics should always be a standard. But of course, it's not. Because automation is driven by other objectives. Some are very good and some are really not very good. Automation, I really do think, is unavoidable. And I don't think it should be avoided at all. So the way I see automation is we block in our destination. We know where we're going. The strategy is about deciding on our methods and what collateral we are prepared to accept by implementing automation. What drivers are we using to realize automation? So we know where we're going, but we still need to decide, what that destination is going to look like for us. So that the second one is automation. If automation is so transformative, why does it result in so many inequalities? Are we designing the future with the same flawed thinking as the past? I think that's the saying. You can't solve problems of the future with ways of thinking in the past. So I think automation for business is about a very few handful of things. It's about increasing profits. It's obviously about efficiency. It's about scalability. And what's not mentioned often is the business owners are thinking about safety. There's a lot of safety when it comes to automation. And of course, there's lots of other things. It's transformative for those sorts of things because it ultimately improves the supply chain. And so I think it can be very transformative for the end product or the end service to the market. But as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to humans that work at the business, I don't think it is so much. An example I like to give is I did some work for the milling industry, and it's a very old industry in South Africa. Lots of manual labor. You certainly wouldn't catch me working in a mill. And one of the mills that I visited, I think it was up in Mpumalanga, It a massive building, multiple buildings all over the place. And the one that I went into is at 5 floors. It had 6 floors, one of a basement, but 5 floors above ground. And there were at least 400 square meters each. Massive, floor upon floor. Anyone want to guess how many people were actually working in that building? It was one person managing 5 floors. In the basement, we had about 15 other workers, and they were basically being used to pack trucks. But they had just gotten a brand new machine, which the owner was showing me, and he was very excited about it. And it's one of these arms, and it was about to take the last 15 jobs away. So the other mood there, other than the owner, he was quite excited about the new technology and all the transformative things his business was doing to bring to the end product to the market. But I had to think about the people. And then the third point is, are companies using innovation as a cover? This is a tough one, for avoiding harder social responsibilities. That's an interesting one because I deal with greenwashing a lot with environmentalism. So I think in South Africa, if we didn't have a private sector, we may very well have had a failed or collapsed state at some point. The private sector has been pivotal in where we are today and helping us be a robust, certainly economically in the banking sector and a few other sectors. Now I'm going to poke the bear on the point is, do companies have social responsibility? And I probably don't think companies have social responsibilities. I know that when I put my business together, we certainly had a paragraph in our contract with all of our staff. It's there, it's definitely there. There's 3 or 4 points there, and we say this is what we're about, but then there's 20 other pages about what we do. So I don't think companies are designed to have that in mind necessarily. I think the users should have that in mind. It's not for the business to do that, but I think the responsibilities businesses have are to work within the regulations pertaining to that market it operates, and with the labor law and environmental law, its care and responsibility for its clients and suppliers. And I think that the ethics is set with the staff and with the colleagues and the type of clientele we're attracting as well, because your purchasing power has got a lot of sway in the industry. I'll shoot a few years ahead, 2035. I believe we will have entire companies with little to no humans. And I guess that's what we're looking at in the future. We need to consider, where do humans fit in and who's making that decision? And I think that a lot of that's going to boil down to legislation. And that's what we can be involved with now and having these sorts of discussions.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's raised some very important points. So thank you. Our next speaker is Mitch Ilbury, helps organizations cope with uncertainty using scenario planning and complexity management. He'll shed light on how organizations think about the future and whether that thinking is failing us.
So when anyone thinks about the future, I feel as though we sit somewhere on a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, we try and predict the future. We see a lot of forecasts. If you open any kind of financial newspaper or watch the news or engage with almost the majority of experts, we try and predict the future with some kind of forecast. On the other side of the spectrum, I think we throw our hands up in the air and say we have no idea what to expect to the future, so there's no point even thinking about it. And I feel as though scenario planning sits right in the middle on that spectrum and is, I believe, the only responsible way to think about the future. And that's because it both captures something valuable to strategic decision making, some kind of indication of where the future may go and what are the underlying drivers of that, but also doesn't try to be foolhardy in predicting a single future, but rather understands the ways in which it can play out. And that's why scenario planning is an incredibly effective tool to tackle any question around the future, but in particular, the focus of this conference around automation in Africa. And I believe there are a number of converging factors that are really relevant that we need to explore when doing scenario planning on automation in Africa, one of which is the possible consequences on labor and the involvement of people in making things. 2, looking at the technology and whether that be the hardware of using machines or the software that guides their operations. but also the energy and the electricity needed to power machines in the first place. So I think there are at least three key intersections that we would need to explore. And instead of trying to predict a single future, trying to imagine what the next 5, 10, 15 years would look like, which I believe would be a mistake, or to throw our hands up in the air and say it's impossible to think about it, I believe that scenario planning is a really effective tool at helping us guide our decision making to do what the legendary scenario planner Pierre Wack, who was famous for doing scenario planning at Royal Dutch Shell, would say, scenarios are a tool to reperceive reality. So it's as much about thinking the future more effectively as it is about reperceiving our current reality, and therefore the value judgments and strategic decisions we need to make about today to enable the future that we want tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, to top it all, we have Jessie Indaba. She's an expert in space engineering and automation and an inspiring innovator. She'll show us the light at the end of the tunnel and how it's possible to move from grand plans to make things happen through advanced space technologies. Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you so much, Kim. I will just speak through about a space and how do we connect to the Automation Indaba as a space professional. And I am here to also put people at ease regarding the automation. I think P has mentioned that it's unavoidable. We can avoid it. It is here. We have been using it, and we need to use it. So I'm going to touch on both the upstream and the downstream. So on the upstream, we are designing and manufacturing the satellites. Using automation there, yes, one would say it does impact job creation, because instead of having your production, you now have an automated machine that could do that. But I always say to people, even though we are moving towards using AI, people need to understand that it is not to replace anyone, but to ensure that what you do, there are no errors in it, especially in space. It's not like a car that if it breaks down, you can just fix it. In space, we leave no room for errors, because there's no chance for us to go up and fix the errors. But then I want to expose the downstream as well, because a lot of people think we just built the satellites because we're excited by doing so, but it doesn't end there. I, as an engineer, do not just get excited after the launch, but it excites me even more when we start seeing the benefits of what we have placed in space benefiting people. The moment we start seeing people making use of the space data in improve the economy, that's what excites me. We're talking of catering for the divide in terms of digital. We know that in the most remote areas, there's a problem with connectivity, which actually means kids that are in the remote areas do not have access to what kids in the urban areas or in other countries that are developed are having access to. We speak of tele-education, we speak of telehealth. A lot of educated people, they move to the urban areas looking for greener pastures, they say, leaving people in the remote areas without the professionals that could assist should there be a challenge. Now, we see space as a tool that could be used in catering for that. Now, coming back to automation, we always see the natural disasters that hit us as people in our environment. No matter how big the constellation of satellites can be, if we do not automate the process of processing the raw data, we will continue losing lives. We will continue having what we experienced in Durban. Now, it would be great if people would now look at automation as a platform or as a tool in ensuring that whatever we do, because a lot of people do not know that we use space data. For weather focus, we use space data. Literally every day. I can't think of anything that we do not do that uses space. And I'm not saying we use space only, the terrestrial solutions that we also use together with space data. So with the data that we are getting, I'm talking about the natural disasters now that we keep experiencing because of the climate change as well. When you receive the data from the ground stations, you have to process the data. You need to make it understandable to the user. I'm going to make an example with a farmer. If you give a farmer raw data, it means nothing to him. He sees the red color, black, gray, blue, it means nothing to him. But if you have it processed for him to understand what is happening in his farm with his crops, he can then make an informed decision and act before his crops die. We're talking about food security. Now, a lot of people do not understand that we need automation to process the data so that we can get the near real-time data and be in a position to act before we face those disasters. I know in the Indaba, not everyone will be from space. I'm an advocate for the cross-pollination of technologies. We would love to see what the other sectors are doing that could also help on the space sector and vice versa as well, because there's a lot of technology that has been developed for space that could be used in other sectors as well. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very interesting. So thank you to all our speakers for your perspectives and for asking the hard questions. I think they've shown that we're not short of ideas and we're not short of technology, but we need to think about the choices we're making and the consequences that follow. Is all the talk going to result in real change? And we look forward to seeing you at the Indaba for some answers. I think everyone's going to be in for some fireworks. Thank you.